Well, hi, everybody. It is noon my time, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I want to welcome you to our May Talks on Tuesday webinar. As you know, we're going to spend our time talking about teleintervention in Virginia. So we're over the course of our two-part series. So this is part one. We're going to go through some data and some survey findings. We're going to hear what practitioners, what folks who took the surveys are saying about benefits of using teleintervention, challenges, and we know there have been quite a few this past year, and we're going to hear some advice from practitioners as we move through our two sessions. The goal of the whole two-part series is to provide you with an update on where we kind of are now with teleintervention after providing this kind of service delivery option with families over the course of the last year, I guess 14 months now. So today I want to invite you to use chat. You're probably used to doing that if you joined us for a Talks on Tuesday before. So feel free to type into chat, say hi. I posted a question there if you want to type into chat and let us know what are you enjoying about springtime right now. I know, I think Lauren said warm weather. I am so grateful for warm weather. My son says that I'm a plant and he thinks I need sun, like the plants are, I just kind of wilt. So this warm weather is right up my alley. Joanne says she's enjoying outdoor dinners on her backyard patio. That's amazing, Joanne. We have a new backyard patio and we're doing a little bit of that. I'm a little afraid of my patio right now though, because I stepped on a wasp last week on my patio. And that was not so fun. I'd forgotten how bad they hurt, but it was lovely. It's lovely to be out there. I just need to be better prepared, right, with shoes. Corey said she's loving all the birds and their babies. Me too, Corey. We have new little house bench babies that are coming to our feeders, so that's super fun. So feel free to say hi down there in chat. I'll do a quick introduction for myself, and then I want to throw it over to my co-presenters for today. So I'm Dana Childress. I am one of the early intervention professional development consultants on our state's professional development team. I work through the Partnership for People with Disabilities at Virginia Commonwealth University. So I am really excited and delighted to have two colleagues with me to co-facilitate today. I'm going to toss it over to Megan so she can turn on her camera and do a quick introduction.
Hi, I'm Megan Schumacher Murphy, and I am a former EI provider, an early Head Start coach, and now I am an assistant professor at Salem State University, where I get to spend time with the next generation of early interventionists. We just got our EI program through the curriculum committee, and we're going to start seeing our first round of folks go through those classes this fall. So I'm really excited. And I'm excited to talk to y'all about the research that we've done about telepractice.
You know, Megan, you must be hanging out with Virginia people. I heard that y'all in there. So you said, I'm excited to talk to y'all, and that is us. Like, that's the way we talk. So good for you.
I know, I sort of feel like
you're one of the us.
I spend more time with Virginia EI people than I do Massachusetts EI people. And clearly you're like getting into me, right? Where I'm like, y'all. I said all y'all to my students the other day. So it's a great gender neutral, like, hey, y'all.
Well, you know, it's funny, relatives that I have up in the north are like, y'all still, and it's just sort of they tell us it's a unique thing you guys say. So it's funny to hear you say that. But you guys might recognize Megan's voice too. She did a Talks on Tuesday series for us. I think it was 2019. That sound right, Megan? 2019 or 2020?
No, I think it was 2020. It was March 4th of 2020, right before the pandemic. So it may have been my fault. But maybe instead of it being my fault, maybe I'm bookending it, right? I started it and now we're finishing it.
Let's hope so. I really like that perspective. Yeah, that's right. Gosh, last year. Right. So if you guys go on our Talks on Tuesday archive page, look for that webinar on working with dads in early intervention under the 2020 archive. So thanks for catching that for me. Thank you, Jeannie. Jeannie's on it. She dropped the link in chat. So I'm going to pass it off to Kyla to do her introduction next.
Thanks, Dana. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyla Patterson. I'm the early intervention team leader at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, which is the state lead agency for Part C early intervention in Virginia. And I'm happy to be here. I'll tell you my Massachusetts and Southern accent connection. I grew up in North Carolina where everybody said I did not have a Southern accent. And then I went to graduate school in Boston, where anytime I said anything to everybody, they all went, "Oh, where are you from? I love your Southern accent." So it was a real interesting contrast there. So,
Isn't it funny how just over state lines, like how different it can be? Yeah, I remember one time my relatives in Ohio, my dad said something like, "You need to mind your aunt." And they were like, "Mind? What do you mean?" Because that was a real Southern phrase. So I think we've all got those little connections. Thanks, Kyla. All right, well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let you guys know what we're gonna do in part one and give you a little bit of information about part two. So for part one today, we are going to review findings from 2 different surveys with early intervention practitioners to hear what they thought about teleintervention. So Kyla's gonna walk you through some findings in the Virginia Provider Implementation Survey, and then Megan and I are gonna share some findings from the Virginia respondents on a survey, the Early Intervention Telepractice in the Time of COVID-19 survey. Both of these surveys came out, I believe, kind of late last year. And so we wanted to share what we found so far, and there's interesting trends across the different surveys. But I promise this isn't going to be, you won't even see a pie chart. Well, you might see one pie chart now I think about it, but this won't be just heavy data because we wanted to share these findings and get your feedback on them. So as we're moving through, there'll be lots of opportunities for you to comment and chat and share your thoughts there. We'll share insights from the survey respondents about coaching practices, what they found challenging, their hopes for the future, and we'll share advice that respondents provided about that they would share with others who are providing teleintervention. As we move through that again, I'd love to hear in chat what you guys think about how these findings represent or maybe match or don't match with your own experience. In part two, we'll kind of go deeper into this and these themes, and then we will hear from a panel of early interventionists from here in Virginia. The early interventionists are practitioners that you also heard from last summer in the Teleflexions video series. So if you haven't heard that, I'd encourage you to check that out. It's on our VEIPD YouTube channel. There's a playlist for Teleflexions. It's also available linked under the video tab on our teleintervention page on the VEIPD site. So those practitioners will kind of update you on where they are now, what is it, 10 months later or so, and they'll provide lots of good strategies and ideas for what they've got going on now. We're also going to talk a little bit about the transition, which many of you are in the midst of, from maybe mostly or only providing teleintervention to some in-person visits. So that's where we're going. Do know that if you registered for today, which you're here, so you did, you were automatically registered for part two. If you have colleagues that would like to join part two, we'll be sending out registration soon so they could register as well. So before we kind of dive into the surveys, we wanted to kind of get on the same page and provide a little context. First, I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page about tele-what. So over the last year, you guys have heard telehealth, telepractice, teleintervention. So we have these phrases that for many of us weren't all that familiar in the context of early intervention before the public health crisis, right? So across the field, within Virginia, outside of Virginia, these 3 terms are used pretty interchangeably, and that's okay. But for today, we wanted to give you some context because you're going to hear all 3 terms. So when we think about these terms, here's what we're meaning. When an early interventionist uses telehealth or telepractice, meaning that they're providing services using a virtual platform, that's how they're working with families. Those practitioners are providing teleintervention. So we just wanted to kind of everybody get on the same page with that. Now you will know that Virginia has used the term telehealth quite a bit. So you'll just see these pop up, and we will define them further as we go along. So this is a little image we are all going to remember forever, right? That little COVID-19 virus bubble, I guess. You guys all know this last year has been like nothing we've ever experienced in our lifetimes, right? Megan mentioned before, March of last year was really when the pandemic hit our country and, was spreading throughout the world. And it seemed like it hit fast, right? We were all trying to adjust in the moment, adjust professionally and certainly adjust personally. Last March was when our governor announced things like schools were being closed across the state. Group gatherings were off limit. We needed to be wearing masks. We needed to practice social distancing, and other guidelines were put into place to try to stop the spread. The public health emergency was really the reason why we had to look towards these terms that were new to us in early intervention, like teleintervention. I think we'll all remember the mad dash to get toilet paper, the toilet paper and, cleaning supplies. This whole experience affected us deeply personally as we were trying to protect our families and ourselves and think about what to do and how to go about our day. But it also caused, as you guys know, an abrupt shift in how early intervention was provided here with us right now across our field, but we're going to focus on Virginia today. So when keeping with the Office of Special Ed Programs, which we know is OSEP, and keeping with their guidance for providing EI during the COVID pandemic, our Infant and Toddler Connection of Virginia, our state office, released temporary policies and procedures starting, I believe, last March to support providers and programs in delivering services in a manner that was consistent with the most updated health and safety guidelines that we had. The policies advised EI programs to consider service delivery options, including telehealth. So this was the definition you see on screen that we used in Virginia. So with the exception of initial assessments for service planning, the term telehealth includes services delivered by phone for audio or through video conferencing, audio-visual technology. So with that said, you guys know this is what services looked like a lot last year, right? And maybe they're continuing to look like. Maybe you're doing your home visits, your early intervention visits at your laptop, on your couch, at your kitchen table. Maybe you were hiding in the laundry room, trying to get away from the background noise in your house. Tell me in chat, what did it look like for you? Where did you provide early intervention when you were doing the tele-intervention piece? Where in your house or your life were you able to manage that? Because I know that was challenging for folks to have to make that shift and figure that out. Beth says in a former man cave. Yeah, I think some people kind of needed that cave, right, to get in the right space. Basement, kitchen table. Yeah, same as Beth. Dining room, base table, in my spare bedroom, my sunroom. So yeah, Josetta says she created a small office space in a spare bedroom, makeshift office, sitting at the dining table with all the leaves in and 3 children flanking her so she could monitor virtual learning. Nikki, you were doing a lot of multitasking, right? So many people were. Donna says, me on the end of the one table and a homeschooler on the other end. So that's a lot to juggle when we're thinking about also switching how to do EI, right? So while you guys were trying to figure this out, lots of work was also going on with Medicaid, with insurance providers to ensure that telehealth services during the public health crisis would be reimbursed. We know that programs were working really hard on the fly, really, right at the beginning to try to adjust their procedures, train their staff, stay connected when everybody wasn't in a same office, and reach as many families as possible. And that's really the key. I think that early intervention continued, it went on despite the pandemic. But I do want to acknowledge that this abrupt shift in service delivery presented a lot of challenges across EI programs across our country with our early intervention system, because when you think back about it, within a few weeks, our entire way of reaching families and doing business really changed. So think back about where you were, where you came from, and how far you've come. I mean, that's really something to celebrate, even on the days when it's still really hard. That's an amazing amount of growth that's happened for our field and for practitioners over the last year. One of the things that that seems to have been helpful in Virginia, based on survey feedback and based on sort of anecdotal what folks are talking about, it seems to have really been helpful that we had early childhood coaching with Rush and Sheldon's approach pretty well established in Virginia as our preferred way of supporting families and interacting with caregivers so that they can support their children's learning. The use of coaching, which you guys know really focuses your role on building the capacity of the families, the parents, so they feel confident engaging their children using intervention strategies during the visit and between visits, was already in place. So I think that was a real strength. And from the surveys, it looks like folks who felt more confident in coaching tended to feel more confident with teleintervention. So today we're going to hear from some of those practitioners on the 2 surveys about their experiences during the pandemic. And you're going to see that there's several themes related to coaching that pop up. So just listen for those when you're thinking about your own experiences working virtually with families over the last year. So before I hand it over to Kyla, I wanted to just get a sense of where you are. So we're going to do this as if this is almost like a little continuum. I would love for you to think about now, coaching during teleintervention. Where are you now? kind of not a fan? Are you thinking, whew, it's been hard, but I've grown as a coach? Or are you thinking, I actually love this, which we've heard from a lot of people that they're like, this is working really well. So here's how you're going to do this. Hover your cursor at the top of your screen where you see viewing Dana Childress's screen. So you'll see that up at the top of your screen. There'll be a drop down little caret. Click on that and look in your menu for annotation. When you click annotation, you'll see a toolbar open at the top of your screen. Click the stamp tool. I mean, you can use the arrow, you could use the drawing tool, but the stamp's probably easiest. And then click and drop your stamp on the little face somewhere on the slide to let me know where you are. If you have any problems with the annotation tool, you can always drop it into chat. That's your backup. Or if you want to kind of explain your answer, go a little deeper, feel free to type it into chat too. Looks like we've got some folks popping in. That's great. Mom/Karen, I love that, says, it was amazing to watch parents take more accountability and set up the session spot for PT. Yeah, Karen, that's going to be a theme. You're going to see that family engagement changed, and folks were really excited about that. All right, let me see. So we have a few folks that have put stars and hearts over kind of to the left where the not a fan is. It looks like we have most people dropping maybe in the, it's been hard, but I've grown, or I love it. So for those of you that it's been hard, type into chat. Larissa says she loves coaching via telehealth. That's fantastic. Beatrice is in the middle for her. She can't annotate. That's okay, Beatrice. I'm glad you put it in chat. Caitlin says she loves it and she's grown so much, but she can't wait to see the kids. Yeah, type into chat. Let me know what was hard for you, or what do you love about it? Tell me more. I think, Caitlin, a lot of people are feeling that way about can't wait to be in person with the kids. I know that there are some families you guys picked up during the pandemic that you've probably never been in person with. So I know that'll be really exciting once you're able to get there. Let's see, you guys are coming into chat now. That's awesome. Nikki says not all of her families have reliable internet or able to pay their internet fees. So in her rural area that's a little more, it's more impoverished, it's been challenging. Yeah, Nikki. Oh, well, Kathy says when she's retired, she plans to do some speech therapy through telehealth. PJ Bottoms all the way. Jan says maintaining the child's interest was challenging. Well, Jan, we're going to talk more about that in part 2 when we hear from early intervention providers about how they did that. So stay tuned. Josetta says definitely helps coaching, but makes the preferred model using items that the children have in their natural environment difficult. Yeah, a lot of adjustments there. Beth says coaching was really happening, which is very cool. Lots of you guys are really liking it. Love the increased participation, cuts down on travel, Jennifer says, allows you to be more efficient. You guys are going to see some of these themes popping up. Yeah, harder to develop a relationship, Janet. I hear you about that. Beatrice says sometimes difficult to demonstrate. That's a truth, Beatrice, and I think that will pop up in our part 2 when we kind of hear from the practitioners about how they did with that. Christina says she's new with observing it, but she's seen some great interactions. That's great, Christina. It's helpful in keeping sessions when someone wasn't feeling well. Larissa, we saw that in the data too, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So thank you guys for providing your input. That's interesting to see kind of where you are. Those of you that used annotation, be sure to click the X in the upper right-hand corner of your toolbar at the top so that you click out of annotation. Otherwise, you might be dropping hearts and stars on the PowerPoint the rest of the time, which isn't so bad, but that's the way you get out of that toolbox. So I am going to turn it over to Kyla. Thanks for clearing the screen, Jeannie. And there we go. Okay, Kyla.
Great, thanks, Dana. So we'll talk first about our own Virginia Provider Implementation Survey, which I think most of you probably know is something we've been implementing annually in Virginia for the past 5 years. Its sort of background or purpose was really to assess how functional assessment, the child outcome summary process, coaching, and natural learning environment practices are being used in Virginia. Those were the practices we were targeting in our state systemic improvement plan, our SIP, and we've been using this survey as an annual way to evaluate our progress. We get great responses every year, even during COVID. In October 2020, when we did our most recent survey, we had over 600 respondents to the survey. It's about a 67% response rate. The information represented all 40 of our local systems, all provider types, local system managers, all levels of experience in early intervention, and both contract staff and in-house local lead agency staff. So we get a lot of good information from that survey. And for that reason, we used it as a vehicle in 2020 to add 5 questions to look at the impact of COVID-19 and teleintervention on those same practices that we've been focused on. We asked 2 questions that were related to coaching. So we asked about the extent to which people agreed with the statement that teleintervention had strengthened their use of coaching practices. And then also asked about agreement with the statement that as a result of my experience in teleintervention, I'll be more confident and consistent in using coaching when we sort of return to in-person intervention. And you can see on your screen that there were really high levels of agreement with both of those statements. So as Dana said earlier, it helped that we had coaching in place already, and folks felt like teleintervention improved or increased, strengthened their use of coaching practices. So I'd love for you all to put some comments in chat and just share, why do you think teleintervention did help coaching practices, or did help folks feel more confident in using coaching practices? And Josetta commented that she feels like we should be asking whether these practices are helping the child outcomes rather than just the coaching practice. And yep, certainly that's ultimately what we want to see. You know, one of the sort of the progression that you hope to see with a practice is that first, people have knowledge about the practice, they're aware of it. Secondly, they're using it. Third, that it then is impacting families and therefore children. And so we'll look at one question around families, but ultimately we'll need some time to see impact on child outcomes. Nikki's commenting that they had to rely on powers of observation only and then use verbal feedback with some modeling on dolls to coach rather than taking over and sharing in person. Yeah, I think that's one of the kinds of comments we've heard a lot of. You really didn't have a choice. If you couldn't be there in person, you had to use those elements of coaching. Stacy's saying it encouraged coaching since you couldn't be present in the home, and had to support parents directly in them, the parent interacting with the child. Any other comments about why telehealth encouraged coaching? Parents often reported skills that were not observed during telesessions. So yeah, a lot more of that verbal interaction had to happen as a way of collecting information. We heard a lot about parents being really engaged in the process and taking ownership of that kind of a role. Got to practice strategies more since they were there and the ones hands-on with their child. I like, Anna, your observation that providers didn't or couldn't, fall back into those bad habits of taking over during the visits. And that's one of the things that, as we think about moving forward, we'll want to think about how we can be really intentional and as we move back into in-person visits, of not falling back into those habits and maintain these great gains that we heard so much about in terms of coaching practices. Let's see, as therapists, we were sharing resources. So my video resources have exploded to share when visual examples help a parent, and modeling and being able to demonstrate. Those are some things we've heard about as challenges, and we'll talk some more about today and in the second part of this series in terms of creative strategies like sharing a video resource. Great, thanks for those comments. We also asked sort of the same two questions, but regarding use of functional assessment practices, right? Assessment via telehealth was obviously very different than in person. The level of agreement here was not as strong as it was with coaching, but I think that we were not as far along pre-COVID in sort of, strong, consistent functional assessment practices as we were with coaching. But we do see a high level of agreement again here for many folks that that teleintervention strengthened their use of functional assessment practices, and that they gained confidence and are more consistent potentially as they move back to in-person assessments. And then our final question was to ask, and remember again, we were asking providers about this, but to what extent they agreed that families participating in teleintervention had reported positive impacts on their child and family. And again, we've got 29% strongly agreeing and 40% mostly agreeing. So share in chat, I'm interested in hearing what you all heard from families or are continuing to hear from families about teleintervention, because we know that not all families liked it. And we also know that not all families were able to access it, right? That it was not, there was not equitable access. And some folks have commented about that too. But what were some of the things that you heard from families about teleintervention? Larissa commented that most felt neutral about it. Some liked it better, and a few liked it less than in person from her caseload. Some families were surprised that it was so helpful. Joanne found that delivering and then picking up assessment tools or toys helped with giving families the tools needed to participate in eligibility screenings or assessments. Yeah, we heard lots of creative ideas of working with families to gather things in, even from within their own home, that could be used in those assessment slots. Got mixed reviews, yep. At first it was positive, like everything else, it got old as so much shifted to being in front of the screen. Yeah. One family mentioned she liked it because it reduced cancellations. That's certainly a benefit that we've heard. Yeah, I think we're currently experiencing computer, Zoom, and COVID fatigue, parents included. Amen to that. Amen to that. Looks like a lot of folks are hearing mixed opinions. Some still relying on it as their little ones are medically fragile. Parents who disliked it mostly disliked having to keep their child's attention to task while doing telehealth. Yep. And then certainly you're able to see more kids in a day because you're not traveling. Okay. I think at this point, Dana, I will turn it back over to you. I think we saw a lot of themes here in the comments that we'll continue to talk about as we look at your research results as well.
Thanks, Kyla. Yeah, as I've been preparing for the panel discussion that we'll do next month, one of the providers said she took so many more kids than she would normally take because she wasn't traveling. And now that she's moving back to going out to see homes, she's completely inundated. She's like, I don't even know how I'm going to do this now that I have the travel time. So that was one of those transition things that we'll talk about next time. Like, what do you do when you got to go back to some kind of a new normal, I guess. So we're going to talk more about that. Well, what I wanted to do before Megan jumps in and shares our survey research is find out from you guys. We're going to do a quick poll to find out if you are still providing teleintervention now and kind of what that looks like for you. So the poll is going to appear on your screen. When the poll appears, you just click your choice and then click submit. And then after we've given people a few seconds to give it a try, we'll look at all the results together. So it looks like votes are coming in. If you have any trouble with your poll, you can always type your answer into chat. So I'm just going to hang out and see if we get more movement on the poll. Okay, Jeannie, do you mind publishing? Oops. And thank you, because I just clicked out of my poll. So it looks like folks are saying 38% are saying yes, they're still providing teleintervention to all families. The next would be 32% yes to some families. Some are, we kind of have a range, but it looks like we're still doing quite a lot of teleintervention in Virginia, which is what we were expecting. A few systems I know have gone to providing most stuff in person, often in green spaces, outside somewhere. So we know some of that is happening too, but it looks like you guys are still doing quite a bit. So I'm going to hand this over to Megan so she can talk a little bit more about what we heard. You guys click the X at the top of your little poll box to close it out for yourself if it's still there. Otherwise, we're going to hear from Megan about kind of some of those trends. So since you guys are still providing teleintervention, be thinking about how these trends, match or what you think about them, and feel free to type it into chat. So hand it over to you, Megan.
So Dana and I recently did a study that really looked at what is the experience that's going on, like how has this a very abrupt shift from telehealth impacted early intervention? And it really started with a conversation we were having, and it went like this. I really wonder how this is going for providers in the field. They've had this abrupt shift, and the thing about EI providers is that we're really flexible and we tend to just like make it work. And one of us said, somebody should research that. And then we realized we could do that. So Dana, if you would push the slide forward, we'll tell you a little bit more about, so that was our research question, right? We were like, wait a minute, we actually are the researchers. We are the heroes we've been looking for, right? I think that's a Marvel, but it could be DC reference. So we really wanted to look at how this change to telepractice had impacted EI, not just for providers, but for families. And one of the things you'll see is that it was really hard for us to access families. So what we're mostly going to share with you is the responses we got from providers, because all y'all, there it is again, Dana, all y'all had a lot to say, and the things that you shared with us are really valuable. We can advance. Yep. So what we asked in our provider survey was, what were you doing before the pandemic? What did it look like? And it was a really general question, right? And then we wanted to know, we gave sort of a drop-down menu of like, here are some challenges we've heard anecdotally or that we were experiencing in our homes. And then there was an option to add more. We had another open-ended question, like how has this impacted the quality of your services? What new practices, or have you adopted any new practices that you'll continue once things go back to normal? Do you have any hopes for the future of EI, and what's your advice, right? So the majority of our responses were short, open-ended questions. We did have a couple of like, check the box, what are your challenges? So again, so initially we thought, well, we're going to compare Virginia to Massachusetts and Illinois because Virginia has adopted a coaching model. You were a little farther along in terms of thinking about telehealth. Illinois doesn't have any, they don't have any sort of, they're like, this is best practice, but there's not a requirement for service modality. Massachusetts has been trying to move toward coaching. And so we initially were like, well, we'll just get respondents from these 3 states. Well, somehow through word of mouth and families and providers, we ended up getting respondents from 26 states, and we're really excited about it. And of course, because Virginia is amazing, most of our respondents, 151 respondents of the 353 were from Virginia. So this data today is actually only based on what we found out from folks in Virginia. And later, we'll put that in the context of all 26 states. But today, we're just going to talk about Virginia. So the biggest theme that we saw immediately was when we asked people, what did your visits look like before? They said it was coaching, right? Providers were they would either say coaching or they would list practices that were like coaching. There was a lot of modeling and a lot of talking about family routines, right? So based on that, a lot of folks put in the responses that their previous coaching actually made the transition a little bit easier. And then in addition to that, this transition to telepractice actually made coaching skills better. So again, we didn't ask sort of leading questions about this. A lot of this came up in the question about like, how has this impacted your services? Or what new skills have you developed? And folks would say that based on the move to telepractice, their coaching got a lot better. And we'll see that broken down in some of the other themes about communication. So the second big theme we saw is that family engagement has really increased for the folks that are now doing telepractice. And this seemed to go hand in hand. The folks that talked about how their coaching skills got better also talked about how family engagement was really awesome. So I do want to give a little caveat. So one of the biggest challenges, and Dana's going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, is that a lot of providers reported that families just said no. They declined telehealth, or families attempted telehealth and they lived in rural areas or impoverished, limited income situations where they couldn't afford internet or they didn't have the technology. And so a lot of the providers said, there's a whole group of people that we cannot reach right now. The people that we can reach, so they are the people who are English speaking, who have access to technology and internet, who have the capacity to say yes to telehealth, telepractice. Those families are the ones that folks are saying were more engaged, right? So when you can access telehealth for early intervention, families are much more engaged. So one of the folks said that it took the emphasis off her. I assume her, I just say her because most early intervention practitioners are her. But it take the emphasis off of me as a practitioner, and it puts it back on the family where it belongs, right? Someone else said that like the more telepractice sessions they had, the like more engaged families were and more questions they had. One provider, and I don't actually know if this was from Virginia, but said once I got out of my own way, families were able to be more engaged and in charge of the interactions with their kids. So one of the benefits of teleintervention is that it really focuses on the parent-child interaction. We're going to go ahead and advance. So interestingly, we did see some benefits for practitioners, which we, to be honest, I wasn't necessarily thinking that we would have initially. The biggest one that people mentioned is that, other than coaching skills, is that practitioners really loved not having travel time, which kind of surprised me, but I practiced in Chicago. So I would see 8 families a day, but I only had like 15-minute drives between each one at the most. I mean, in Chicago, that's like half a mile, but still. So families really, or practitioners really loved not having as much travel time. Some folks saw more families. A lot of practitioners said, well, now that I don't have to drive, I can see that family at their dinner time and still actually have dinner with my own family. And so I'm able to see different routines, right? Bedtimes or snack times or things like dinner. Practitioners really, like almost all 150 folks in Virginia said that their coaching skills really did improve. One of the other things is that practitioners got a lot better at verbal communication, and the how and the why, right? Which makes a ton of sense. I've found this in my teaching as well. When I am not able to physically model for students or families what to do, I feel like I have to do a much better job of saying, like, here's how you offer, milk or juice. And the reason you do that is to verbally model the language. And you want to give a model, but you also want to encourage pointing and gesturing. And you want to give wait time, and we give wait time because it takes children time to process. And here's how long that is. And so I think that is going right along actually with the improved coaching skills, and also providing help with that emphasis on parent-child interactions. The other piece of communication that's gotten better for a lot of practitioners is that now that they're already on an online platform, whether it's Zoom or FaceTime or on the phone, they actually have gotten better at sending follow-up resources and texts or emails to families. And so families are getting more resources in terms of videos or in writing that they can refer to after. And again, these were all themes that popped up from the open-ended responses in Virginia. This is one of my favorite quotes that a practitioner shared, which was, "I will be using my new, more efficient coaching skills and confidence when I'm back in the home. And if I see the same families, they're going to be used to taking more of a lead and showing me their skills at practicing strategies. I think I will have a better practitioner. I am a better practitioner because of the telehealth experience." And so again, none of us wanted COVID. None of us wanted a lot of our families to not be able to access services due to lack of internet or language barriers or financial situations that were leading to a lack of internet. But leave it to early intervention providers to be able to make it meaningful and to shift and grow while we're in the middle of this really challenging time. So I think that our data really reflects the resilience of the folks in our field and our ability to like shift and make it work based on how it is that we engage with families, right? We go in with maybe a plan and then you have to shift and make it work depending on what we have going on at the time. So those are a lot of the benefits that we saw. Dana's going to take us through some of the challenges. And in order to make that transition, if you could share in the chat, what are your biggest challenges with providing teleintervention, telepractice as a provider? Not being able to, Josetta says not being able to give hugs. Oh my gosh, yes. Karen says poor internet. Yep. Those were both things that our providers who responded said that. Sitting all day. Oh my gosh, yes, right? Sitting all day in one spot, Jessica, that is a huge problem. And there were a couple survey respondents who said that was challenging as well. Yeah, tech issues again, right? Larissa is talking about these technology issues and also sitting in one place. So there was a PT that said, let me come back up in the chat. So Stephanie was talking about how you can't feel how the child is moving. That was one of the things we heard a lot of from physical therapists, was not being able to assess tone or properly demonstrate exactly how to move children's bodies. And not being able to model. Yep. Oh, Jan, you had a little motion sickness. She was saying she would get dizzy when parents carried the phone around. Tired eyes. Yeah, I have this like handy dandy set of blue light glasses. You're seeing a lot of ceilings. Yeah, it was all very challenging. So the challenges that you were experiencing are actually a lot of the themes that we saw for our provider challenges as well. So those challenges, again, the biggest challenge that we saw by far was that providers reported families declining telepractice. And Dana and I did, in fact, reach out to families and try to find them. I think for the same reasons they were declining telepractice, they weren't filling out our survey as well, right? Like if you're having families decline telepractice that's online, it's hard to reach them with an internet survey. So that's a huge issue, right? And that I think we're going to see we were talking about outcomes earlier. We're not sure what those outcomes are going to be yet. Another challenge that we saw is for some folks, it was really hard to support parent-child interactions over a screen. That could be really challenging. One of the other big situations, or one of the other big challenges that we saw, was managing EI sessions while also managing your own things that were going on, right? Childcare, virtual schooling, things that are happening working from home, right? Where are you going to work? Do you have, your own, how are you going to manage one device and homeschool and work, things like that. And then almost as many folks as talked about declining mentioned, we had asked if the provider had issues with internet. And what we found was a lot of people filled in the other category that families had a lot of challenges with internet. So there were a lot of issues with limited access in the rural communities, or due to limited incomes, they didn't have the right devices. There would be data limits, or some folks who could access internet, their internet wasn't stable enough to do the voice and the video. So again, for folks that had barriers about technology or income that led to barriers with technology, this was a really challenging time. And in some cases, it was a barrier to service. Another thing we heard a lot about, and Stephanie, our PT, who's in the session with us today, talked about this in the chat, was there were a lot of difficulties with assessing motor development and tone. There was also a lot of difficulty building connections with families, right? And I feel like Zoom can be like a charisma vampire. Like, you can be the most amazing, cheerful, warm, relationship-based person, and it's just different over a screen, right? And then there were a couple of folks that said they weren't able to directly teach children and model directly for families, and that was challenging for them. Yeah, charisma. Corey likes my charisma vampire, right? The Zoom just like sucks the charisma right out of everybody. And that's really challenging, right? And I think it's hard for all of us. You can go back and you can go ahead and advance, Dana. So even with all of the challenges, we asked for advice from current telehealth practitioners to future. And one of the things that we got a lot of is just do it, right? This is my favorite. It has a lot of challenges, but a lot of benefits, like hot coffee while working, just like office jobs. And that you have to really believe in it to get parental buy-in, present it as a really great option and have reasons to back up your claims. Be open about the limitations. Parents appreciate hearing about the realities of the situation, and lean on other providers to share what's working, right? Which the whole next session in this series is going to tell you, or is going to give you access to providers that have made it work in a lot of various ways. So thank you so much for those of you that gave us data and also that came to listen. Dana is going to take over now, but I'm going to leave you with just do it.
I love that, Megan. Thank you. Sorry, it's a little hard. Took me a second to get everything back up. So we absolutely heard you and continue to hear you about the challenges. You know, it's real, but if you think about it, and I know this is not the same, but early intervention is challenging, right? There's always different kinds of challenges when you meet different kinds of families, but we tend as a field to overcome them, to find a way around them. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to spend some of our time in part 2 trying to help you guys, you know, share your strategies, but also hear some other good ideas. Because even when our panel was meeting the other day just to prepare, we had some very seasoned, very experienced practitioners. One got another idea from another one. It's like, I never thought of that. So hopefully you'll have some suggestions next month to help you along your journey as you're becoming kind of better and better and more confident providing teleintervention. So the last theme here is a theme that we heard very strongly. Again, it relates to coaching in our survey. So we had a question towards the end of the survey that asks if, as a practitioner, would you be interested in using telepractice or providing teleintervention post-pandemic? And as you can see, out of all of the Virginia respondents, 97% said yes. We also found that when we asked a question about, like Megan said, about your new practices or about your advice, or we had a question about your hopes for the future, some of our open-ended questions often had folks throwing this out, that telepractice is valuable. It's been a great option for families, especially families, and I saw in the chat, like families whose child may be medically fragile. we saw that most respondents said this can be effective. Now, maybe not in every situation, and not every respondent, as you can see, but so many said they wanted to continue to offer telepractice as an EI service delivery option post-pandemic. And in fact, that's the trend that's happening right now across our whole field. I only know of one state, and I could very well be wrong about this, but there was only one state that I knew of that had a really well-developed telepractice system, training and everything for early intervention. Some other states were playing around with it, but now across our field, we're seeing a lot of states really consider, how do we keep this going? And there's a saying that makes me think about it, like, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You know, this is a new experience we were kind of launched into, and there are a lot of positives to this option. So what I want to do is turn it over to Kyla to let us know where we are as a state with considering continuing the use of telepractice after the pandemic.
Yeah, and you know, we're right there with this 97% who want to see it continue. You know, we had really hoped and were trying to pursue it as an option before the pandemic. We hadn't gotten there. You know, I think the pandemic has been a bit of a proof of concept in that we clearly are able to deliver early intervention services in this way, and for the most part, very effectively. And so, yes, we want to see it continue as well. We're working really closely with the Department of Medical Assistance Services, our state Medicaid agency, to have it become a permanent Medicaid reimbursable service delivery option for early intervention. And we'll certainly be keeping folks up to date as we continue that work. But that is our goal, is to keep it as a permanent option.
Okay, thanks, Kyla. So option, hear that word for those of you that are maybe we're on the not a fan end. This could be an option. And I've heard folks talk about different ways to use the option, that it could be, this would work better for some families, or maybe some families you see via telepractice once a month, and the other times you see in person, or different combinations. So you know, it's kind of, we can get, if this were to work out, we could get kind of creative about thinking about really what's best for the family. It's sort of another way to individualize early intervention. Jessica says, yay, thank you. So thanks, Kyla. So as we start to wrap up, I want to hear from you guys about, Anna says, great news, always welcome options, definitely. So the last question we asked on our survey was about advice. So what advice do you have for others who are thinking of using telepractice to deliver EI services? So think about, you know, if your program hires somebody new next week, what could you share from your experience about how to make this successful? And think about how to support the families, but also how to take care of yourself. Because as you guys said, sitting in that chair all day, your eyes get tired. So kind of think about it from both perspectives. Megan and I got so much good information in this advice open-ended question that we're going to be excited to kind of share those themes as we kind of keep combing through the data across the states. So let's see, Lauren gets us started with how to help the family set it up. Environment, technology, camera position. That's a great idea, Lauren, because if this feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar to you, imagine for families. And she says, be patient. Beth says sharing information pre-visit is so helpful. So Beth, how did you share that? Did you have a meeting with the family before the actual visit? Did you do that by phone? Let us know what that looked like for you, because I've certainly heard folks say, I had a 15-minute visit where we talked about where to place the camera, and everybody got, you know, practiced logging in and everything worked well. Karen says, PT, have a doll and a couple of things like a ball and a rattle handy. Have plans A through D. So yeah, you kind of get creative with what's in your own environment, Karen, right? That can help facilitate learning through the camera. Yeah, Helen says she's agreeing with Beth. Be flexible, reach out beforehand so you have a plan. Yep, Sherry, so you're right along that same path as well. Practice with families. Anna says, prepare the family for what it will be like, just like you would share expectations for an in-home visit. That's such a great point. We have to set the tone and orient families to how this is going to work, because for most families, they don't have a frame of reference for what to expect with EI. Now, many of our families might have had a frame of reference for how to interact virtually, you know, FaceTiming friends or family members, but we heard a lot of just anecdotally, I've heard folks say, Some families felt a source of stress thinking, how am I ever going to get my 18-month-old to stay in front of the screen for 45 minutes? And that was a really important thing for families to understand, that that was not the purpose or how we were going to do early intervention. This was really about connecting with the parent who will then support the child. So kind of a learning curve there. Beth says she used emails and phones to set up, suggested having toys nearby. Yep, gave them kind of an orientation of what to expect. Larissa says the work-home balance, self-care, help with tech setup for families and reminders prior to visit. Good communication, so important. Yeah, the work-home balance is certainly something we heard folks say was hard. And you guys mentioned it, how you were at the other end of the table from your kids doing virtual school. I'll tell you, from somebody who's worked from home for 10, almost 11 years, that boundaries is hard too, because you think I could just work a little longer, or I could, answer that email, because it's all there in your home. So setting up those boundaries and practicing self-care, Larissa, I'm so glad you brought that up. Super important. I need to take my own advice. So I love that. Well, what we want to do is to share 3 quotes from the advice. Like I said, we got a lot of it. We're still combing through it, but these are 3 quotes that really jumped out to us, to Megan and I, as kind of themes across the advice. So this one here talks about self-care, like Larissa talked about. So she says, or he says, don't be scared of it. First, focus on the relationship with the parent and have a good conversation getting to know each other, which is what you guys said in chat. Instead of expecting to virtually interact with the child, encourage parents to interact with the child with what's normally in their home. So as providers, practitioners had to really absorb the idea and kind of let it go that you're going to have that one-on-one with the child for so long. I mean, when we're coaching, we know we're really incorporating the parents' learning. But I think folks, I've certainly heard about folks in other states too, that was really a struggle, that they expected to be able to engage the child that long. And we all know that's not developmentally appropriate. But also that support and that collaboration with the parent to make sure that they know what to do. Helen says, we stress letting the child do what they do while we watch, stressed letting the child do what they do while we watch. And then, yeah, you gather so much of that good functional information. Another quote here says, use an earpiece. Give yourself breaks from looking at the screen. Give information to families on how they can make the visit successful. So these are just like things you guys talked about in the chat. And then our last quote here, like Megan said, represents one we saw so often throughout our survey. Try it. It will make you a better therapist. That's a quote directly from one of our respondents. So like Megan said, go tele-intervention, give it a try. I love it that you guys have tried and you've decided to join us today. We feel like, based on these respondents and the information from the provider survey, it's been a hard experience, but there's a lot of positives that are coming out of it. And the message from the survey was pretty clear that high quality early intervention is possible to be provided by telepractice. So that's it for us today, guys. I know that it's about time for us to wrap up. I want to thank you for joining us today and joining the conversation. Jeannie has dropped the survey link into chat if you want to click on that and complete it right now. Otherwise, you'll have an email in your inbox with a link to the survey once you complete the feedback survey, and we'd love to have any feedback and ideas you have for our part 2 are welcome too. Once you complete the survey, you'll have access to your certificate of completion. Really important note, make sure you check out down here. When you see your certificate, we often get questions that the date is wrong. Make sure you download and save your certificate to your desktop. Once you've downloaded it, saved it, and printed it, the date stamp will automatically update to reflect today's date. So don't stress about that. Just follow through with the printing and the saving, all that, and you should see the date update. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to Jeannie, who's providing our tech support in the back end. If you have any other questions or thoughts about part 2, what you'd like to hear discussed in part 2 with our panel discussion, feel free to email me. So I want to thank Megan for joining us and for working with me on this survey. It's been a lot of fun, and certainly thank Kyla for sharing the Virginia provider information and the state's perspective. So we'll hang out another minute or two. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them into chat. But otherwise, thank you.